So we have done what is Descartes rule of sign. So Descartes rule of sign gives you an idea about the number of roots and the nature of roots. But the problem was Descartes rule of sign do not give you the exact number of roots. Like it will give you that. You remember the Descartes rule of sign? It was like the number of positive roots of the equation will not exceed the number of changes in sign basically, and if less is less than by an even number. So suppose you have four changes in sign for the coefficients of fx, then what you can say that either the number of positive root is 4 or 2 or 0. So this was your Descartes rule of sign, but it will never give you an exact number. In very rare cases it can give you exact number. So now we have something called as Sturm's method for location of roots. So now let me write it down. Sturm's method for location of roots. So now this method will exactly give you the number of roots, and it will also give you where exactly will the roots lie between two numbers basically. So this method will be very very powerful. The only problem is that it is a bit laborious. Okay, you have to work a bit. So remember, so this is your Sturm's function. So let me define what is known as Sturm's function. So I'll just explain the method. So the first step is this. Suppose you have been given some equation or some polynomial. So let fx be some polynomial. So you have been given some polynomial with real coefficients and so whenever you have a polynomial, the derivative will exist. You find out the derivative, and f1x, so I am denoting the derivative by f1x, be its derivative. So what is this? This is the polynomial, this is its derivative. You have two polynomials now. A polynomial and its derivative, the function fx and f1x. So we can find their HCF. So there are two methods of finding HCF. One method is the long-term division. So let's apply the long-term division for finding HCF. So how do you use the long-term division? Suppose I want to find the HCF of some number here and some number here. What you do? Whenever there is some remainder here, you again divide, you take this here and divide, right? So the remainder becomes your divisor and the last divisor becomes your dividend. This is how you find, and you keep on doing until you get some non-zero remainder, right? And the last non-zero remainder is your HCF. So this is also true for polynomials. We have done it, but here we will change something. So this is very very important. Let the operation of finding the HCF of fx and f1x be performed with the following modification. That means we will use this long-term division itself to find the HCF, but we'll slightly modify this method. Okay, so the modification is as follows. So this is the modifications. The sign of each remainder is to be changed before it is used as the next divisor, right? Before it is used as the next divisor and the sign of the last remainder is also be changed. So I'll explain this, written this in pink. So what is the thing? So what Stump said that you perform this long-term division only, but with slight some modification. The sign of each remainder is to be changed before it is used as a next divisor. So whenever you have some, so this is your f1x, the derivative, and this is your polynomial. So you are performing the HCF, you will get some remainder here. Suppose I am taking the remainder here, r1x. Okay, now you are taking, so what is the next step? What is the next step? You will take this remainder as your divisor and this becomes your dividend. But Stump said no. When you are taking the remainder as your divisor, you change the sign. So you multiply each coefficient by minus. So before taking it as a next divisor, you change the sign of the remainder. This is what they have written. Sign of each remainder is to be changed before it is used as the next divisor. Suppose your last remainder is, suppose your remainder is x square plus 1. Suppose. So the next divisor will be minus x square minus 1. Do not take x square plus 1. Okay, so the sign of each remainder is to be changed before it is used as the next divisor. And also the last remainder that is remaining, which cannot be used as any more divisors. So the last remainder that you are getting, you have to also change the sign of that. And the sign of last remainder is also changed. So up to here is very simple. We are performing the operation to find fx and f1x, polynomial and its derivative, by a slight modified manner. The modified manner being, we change the remainder before taking it as the next divisor, and we also change the remainder of the last sign of the last remainder. Okay, so the modified remainders. So what is mean by modified remainders? The remainders whose signs are changed. Remainders. So the modified remainder, that is the remainders with their signs changed. So I am calling them as a modified remainder with the signs changed are denoted by so I am denoting the derivative by f1x and the polynomial by fx, and the first remainder, second remainder with their signs modified are denoted by f2x, f3x, dot dot dot. They will continue. Suppose the last one is frx. Okay, so we are calling this as this. The modified remainders I am calling them as f2, f3 dot dot frx, and they have been given a name. So they are known as So all the functions, how many functions now I have? I have the functions fx, f1x, function polynomial, its derivative, and all the modified remainders. So all of this together are called as stum functions. Okay. So the polynomial is derivative and all the modified remainder are together called as stum functions, and except the polynomial, the remaining ones, f1x, the derivative and the modified remainder dot frx are called as auxiliary functions. So which are the new functions which we have made. So that is the reason I call them auxiliary functions. So together they all are called as stum functions, and this ones, the derivative and the modified remainders, are called as auxiliary function. Okay. Okay. So let's note few things. Note. So we have talked about something called as multiple roots. So this will give us a very important fact. So remember one thing. When my polynomial, or when my polynomial equation or algebraic equation fx equals to 0 has a multiple root, that means equal roots, then fx and f1x will have some common factor, and which will be present in the highest common factor. So when my given polynomial equation has a multiple root, what will I observe? I'll observe that the last remainder will not be a constant. It will be some polynomial of x. So again I'm repeating, when my equation has some multiple root, then the polynomials fxx and f1x will have a common factor, and which will be the last remainder. So SCF will be the last remainder with some signs modified possibly. So keep that in mind. So when fx has multiple roots, the last remainder will be some function of x, a polynomial in x again. But when your algebraic equation has no multiple roots, so the HCF will just be a constant. It will not be some function of x. Okay. So the last remainder, so this will be required when we do some sums to notice few things. The last remainder, last remainder frx is a constant if fx has no multiple roots. So keep that in mind. If your polynomial equation has no multiple roots, no equal roots, your last remainder will be equal to some constant, but if fx has multiple roots, then the last remainder will be of the form some px, where degree of px is at least 1. It cannot be a constant at least. It will be a polynomial of degree at least 1. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this will be very much essential while doing the sums. This will also give you us an idea whether my given equation has a multiple root or does not have multiple roots. So this will be very much important for us. Now we are almost done. So now we have the stum functions in our hand, and this also I know. Now, so on what basis I can talk about the nature of roots? So the theorem says this. So this is what we will be doing is something called as Stum's theorem. We'll not do the proof. Okay, we'll just state the theorem and do its applications. So, oh sorry, Stum's theorem. I'm writing proof. So Stum's theorem. So it is divided into basically two parts. It first talks about when will your equation have all roots. So when your equation has all equal roots or unequal roots, that means the first case is about which is written in purple. That means when your equation do not have any multiple roots. So all roots unequal. So when all roots are unequal, then you will be using this theorem. How can you understand that all the roots are unequal? By looking at the last remainder. If the last remainder is just a constant, you can understand that all roots are unequal, right? And when it has some multiple roots, okay, then I will talk about the second Stum's theorem. So now first theorem will talk about when all the roots are unequal. So this is the case of unequal roots. So hold on. So possibly this. Okay. Writing this one. This is the theorem. Let fx be a polynomial with real coefficients and a and b are real numbers, and a comma b are real numbers, assuming a is strictly less than b. A can be 1, b can be 5, and so on, right? So I have taken some interval basically. So Stum's will give you the number of roots in this interval. The number of real roots of the equation, the number of real roots of the equation fx equals to 0 lying between a and b. So you see what I have done. I have some algebraic equation or some polynomial, and I have given you some interval, and I want to know in that interval how many real roots of this equation lie or this polynomial lie, right? So the number of real roots of this equation lying between a and b is equal to, so Stum's has given you the exact number equal to this. The number of is equal to the excess of the number of changes of signs is equal to the excess of number of changes of signs in the sequence of Stum's functions functions fx, the derivative, the modified remainders, when a equals to b, sorry, when x equals to a, over the number of changes of signs in the sequence when x equals to b. Okay, so I'll explain. So this will be very much essential. I'll do a sum based on this. So try to understand. I have given you some interval a and b, and you want to know the number of real roots. So you want to know the number of real roots of the equation fx equals to 0 lying between a and b. So it's equal to the excess of number of changes in signs in the sequence of sum function this when x equals to a over the number of changes in the signs in the sequence when x equals to b. So what is the meaning of this? Don't worry, when I do the sums I'll explain. So at x equals to a, you determine the signs of all of these, and when x equals to b, you determine the signs of all of this, and what to do I'll tell you. Okay, so how this excess thing will be calculated I'll tell you. Okay, so let's do some sums based on this. So this is only the half part of the sums theorem, because we are assuming when all the roots of the equations are unequal. So it has some, if it has some multiple roots, then another theorem will be used. You just go through the statement once and then I'll go do the sums. So let me take a sum based on this theorem. So this is the first question. The question is, find the number and position of the real roots of the equation x cube minus 3x plus 1 equals to 0. So find the number and position of the real roots of this equation. So you have to determine where exactly, first of all you will determine how many roots are real and so on, whether they are equal, unequal, and next you determine the position also. Where will the roots lie? Okay. So this, how do you start? Solution. You call this as your fx, send everything to the left hand side, which is already present in the left hand side. X cube minus 3x plus 1. You find out the derivative, call the derivative as f1x, which is the derivative of this. Derivative of this is 3x cube minus 3x, taking 3 common, right? So remember, one more thing I forgot to mention, you can always remove the positive factors from any of the auxiliary functions. You can remove these 3 without any hesitation, as we used to do in the HCF, okay? But you cannot remove the negative sign. Suppose minus 3 was common, then you cannot remove that minus 3, you can only remove 3. So what is f1x? F1x will only take this much, x cube minus x, removing the factor 3. You can remove only the positive factors, positive constant, removing the factor 3. That is allowed, okay? Factor 3, because that was also allowed in HCF. So I have my function, I have my derivative. So let's perform the process of finding the HCF, right? So here I will take here, let me put it here now. Our task is to find all other auxiliary functions. So here I'll take the, so sorry, this is 3x square, no? I'm doing the derivative. This is just, so sorry, I'm doing the derivative. derivative of x cube is 3x square and derivative of 3x is 3. This is 1, this is 1. Sorry for that. This is square. So the derivative is x square minus 1 and the polynomial is x cube minus 3x plus 1. So let's perform the process of finding the HCF. So it will be x times, so this will become x cube minus 1 into x is x. This is getting cancelled, minus 2x plus 1. So this is your remainder, first remainder, but so you cannot take this as your next divisor because you cannot divide this further, so this is the remainder. But before taking this as the next divisor, you have to change the sign. So therefore the second auxiliary function is what? Changing the sign. So minus 2x will become 2x and plus 1 will become minus 1. So now you will take this as you take this as your next divisor and this as your dividend. Again let's perform. So here it is half, here it is half into x. So 2 into half is 1, x into x is x square minus, this is how much? Half x. So plus minus getting cancelled, half x minus 1. So what you can do, therefore you cannot divide, you can also divide further, you can also divide it, no? So how can you get, you can, it can be divided, why not? You can take plus, 2 into 1 by 4, right? Right?
So, but it will be again that 1 will be remaining, right?
No. Oh, sorry. While finding the HCF, we only do the, hold on. No, we'll not divide it because while finding the HCF, you remember the long term division, you do not repeat this. So this will be your next divisor and this will be this, right? So therefore, we'll not stop here because division is still possible, Gaurav, right? So yes, we can take 1 by 4. So 2 into 1 by 4, 2 into 1 by 4 is half x, because 2x into 1 by 4 is, yes, we can divide. We take the, if it is divisible, we will divide definitely. And this will become minus 1 by 4. Right? So this is becoming minus, this is becoming plus, this is getting cancelled. 1 by 4 minus 1. 1 by 4 minus 1. 1 by 4 minus 1 is nothing but minus 3 by 4. Now we cannot divide. So therefore, your auxiliary function f3x is nothing but, you can multiply by any number and so on. So we are not interested in taking the fractional part. I will multiply by 4. Again and again I am telling you, you can multiply by only positive numbers. So I am multiplying by 4. So 4 and 4 is getting cancelled, minus 3. But I have to change the sign. 3. Am I clear up to here? So going beyond this is definitely not important because now your remainder is a constant, so that makes no sense, right? So we'll stop here. So what are the auxiliary functions we have got? Fx, f1x, f2x and f3x. So let me write all the auxiliary functions together. So what are the auxiliary functions? The first was the polynomial given in the question, which was x cube minus 3x plus 1. The second auxiliary function was the derivative, removing the factor 3. So this was x square minus 1. The second auxiliary function was 2x minus 1. And the third auxiliary function was 3. These three are your auxiliary functions. These all are your stump functions. So now we'll use the theorem. So we will take some interval and we'll determine the changes in sign in each of them. Okay. So remember what was the thing? You choose any interval. In that interval, suppose you're choosing the interval as a to b. So you determine the sign of this when x equals to a. You determine the sign of this when x equals to b. So what I'll first do is this. I'll write all of them together. So this is my fx. This is my fx. This is my f1x. This is my f2x. And this is my f3x. And this is my changes in sign or changes of signs. Okay, so I have this table here like this. Now I will take the first interval to be, I'll keep a space here for some reason. I'll take the first interval to be 0 to infinity, because this will give me the number of positive roots. So firstly I will determine how many positive real roots are there, how many negative real roots are there. So the first interval that I will be choosing is a is 0, b is infinity. Let's determine the sign of this. So put 0 everywhere in each of them. If I am putting 0, 0, I am remaining with plus 1. So the sign is positive. If I am putting here 0, the sign is minus 1, the sign is negative. If I am putting 0 here, sign is negative. If I am putting 0 here, it is plus 3, it is positive. Okay. So what is the changes in sign? 1 changes in sign, no change in sign, but again one more. What is the changes in sign? 2 is the changes in sign. So did you understand this step? So now we see the changes in sign. We see the changes in sign when I put infinity. Infinity is a very big number. So when I have a very big number, I can make that cube more than this. So remember one thing I have already explained. Whenever you are putting infinity, the value will only depend on the highest power term. So whether the value is positive or negative here, that will depend on the sign of x cube, and the smaller degree term will not play any role, because I can make this x cube bigger than these two quantities. What is the sign of x cube? It is positive, so it will be positive. If there would have been minus x cube and you are putting infinity, then it will be negative. So it will only depend upon the highest power term. Highest power is x square, which is positive. Highest power is 2x. So 2 into a very big number minus 1 is definitely positive. And definitely positive. If you are putting infinity, it is remaining 3. 3 is positive. What is the changes in sign? No changes in sign, 0. So what was the theorem? So the theorem said that you determine the changes in sign of this sequence. You have to write this in sequence. You cannot write f1 here, fx here. No. This is the sequence that I will be following in Stump's theorem. So we have written the changes in sign. So number of real roots in this equation is the excess of changes in sign. So here I have 2 changes in sign, here I have no changes in sign. What is the excess? 2. So therefore number of roots lying between 0 and infinity is 2, because the number you take out the difference of this 2. Okay, you take out the difference of this 2. Even if it is 0, here it is 2, still the number of roots between 0 and infinity will be 2. So therefore number of positive roots, any root lying between 0 and infinity is actually positive. So number of positive roots is equal to 2. Now we will next determine the number of negative roots. So for that I will consider the interval minus infinity to 0. I'll take this interval. So let's do for minus infinity then. When I am putting minus infinity here, that will become minus, because a very big negative number, so its cube will be definitely negative. It will not depend upon these two terms. Again, minus infinity square minus 1000. 1000 is not that big, still I am considering. So minus 1000 square is positive, and minus 1 still positive. This is negative and this is positive. What is the changes in sign? 1, 2, 3. So how many negative roots are there? You may check from here, this interval. Right? So excess of sign is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. Because I am taking this interval. So therefore, number of negative roots, definitely real roots, because negative and positive means they are real, it is 1. That means this equation has no complex roots, because the degree of the equation is 3 and I have got 2 positive roots and 1 negative root. I have got 2 positive root and 1 negative root. So that means all the roots are real, 2 positive roots and 1 negative root. So 3 real roots, among them 2 are positive, 1 is negative. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So we are still not done. Keep that in mind, because we have to also find out the location of the roots. So this is a boring job. So what you have to do here while taking the location, you want to locate the positive roots. You have to determine where exactly the positive roots lie, in which interval. What you do, you take any numbers here randomly. Suppose I am taking -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Maybe you have to take more, who knows? Okay, I don't know. You have to check whether the roots lie here, roots lie here. That means now I have decreased this range. I want to know exactly where the roots lie. Okay, you have to maybe calculate more. You have to start with -5, -4, -3. Let me first check here. If all my roots lie whether in each of these intervals, then it is done. So for that, again we will be using the terms from this one theorem. So fx, f1x, f2x, f3x, and changes in sign. So you put -2 everywhere. You put -2 in this, -2 in this, -2 in this, -2 in this. You have to put in each of them. So put it, so what will you get? -2 cube. So let me do it. -2 cube is -8. So it will be negative. You may check. If you are putting -2 here, -2 square is 4. 4 minus 1 is 3. That means it is coming positive. This will become, so you see, this will always be positive because it is 3. So this will not take a lot of time. Let's take the sign of this one. When I am putting -2, this is becoming minus. When I am taking -1, this is becoming minus. When I am taking 0, it is becoming minus. So I am putting all of the numbers here. Firstly, I am doing one by one. If I am putting 1, it is becoming positive. It is becoming positive. You may check here also. So right. Okay. Let's check for fx when I am putting -1. So -1 cube is -1, right? -1 plus 3. So it is becoming plus. It is becoming plus. At 0 it is becoming plus. So 0 also it is easy to compute. It is becoming minus at 0. And at 1, what about this? 1, it is becoming negative. And at 2, it is becoming positive. You may check. For -1 here, -1 square is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So it has got no sign. I will write here 0. For 1, it has again got no sign. I will write here 0. I will write here plus. Write down the changes in sign. 1 change, 2 change, 3 change. 3 changes in sign. We just ignore this. So 1 change, 2 change. 1, 2. 1, no change, no, so 0. That means there is a difference is 1. That means there is a root lying between -2 and -1. There is no excess of sign, so there is no root lying between -1 and 0. there is a root lying between 0 and 1, and there is a axis of sign is 1. So axis is 1 here, axis is 1 here, axis is 1 here. So I have got the exact location of roots. One root lies between -2 and -1, another lies between 0 and 1, another lies between 1 and 2. I have got the position of all three. Maybe you have to do some more. Maybe if you are not getting here any excess of signs, you complete for 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. You have to check. That is just hit and try. Okay, so I'll just conclude here. Thus, one root lies between -2, -1, other between 0 and 1, and another between 1 and 2. So I have got the exact location of the roots. Okay, I have got the exact location of the roots. So this process was only true when my given equation had no multiple roots. And how did I conclude that it has got no multiple roots? By looking at the last remainder. If the last remainder is some number, you can conclude that a given equation has no multiple roots.